Hello and welcome to another off-the-shelf board game review. This week we're going to look at the Pathfinder Adventure Card Game. This is a card game that's emulating a role-playing game, a fantasy-based role-playing game that uses mainly the classes we're familiar with that were taken directly from the Pathfinder role-playing game itself. The Pathfinder Adventure Card Game is a fully cooperative game for 1 to 4 players, ages 13 and up, plays in about 90 minutes. There is an expansion pack that is available for the game already though that does add additional heroes, and it allows you to play with up to 6 players, but this is definitely going to add to the play time, so it's definitely something to consider if you're looking for a game to play with more than 4 players. The Pathfinder Adventure Card Game is a scenario-based game that's trying to emulate a role-playing game. Players will be visiting various locations trying to grab treasures, weapons, equipment, spells, and new abilities to build up their decks to become more powerful. They do that by simply visiting various locations, encountering various things such as allies, gaining new equipment, or even learning new spells. Players do this by playing cards out of their hands and rolling dice to try to succeed at putting these cards into their hand or overcoming these difficulties. The trick is the players only have a certain amount of cards in their hand and in the draw pile. When the draw pile is empty and they're forced to draw cards, that player is defeated because your draw pile is your hit points. And you can lose hit points by fighting things such as enemies and encountering barriers that are going to make your life more difficult. The eventual objective of the game though is to encounter the henchmen and defeat the final bad guy. Defeating henchmen will allow you to close locations so the bad guy can't escape those locations. Of course, your eventual goal is to find the big bad guy and defeat him before the timer that's built in the game expires and you run out of time. That built-in timer comes in the form of the blessing deck. Every time a player takes a turn, and every single player takes a turn, they're going to flip over 1 card from the blessing deck. There's only 30 cards in the blessing deck, and if you manage to go through all 30 cards of the blessing deck before you find the final bad guy and defeat him, all the heroes lose. If you manage to defeat the bad guy before the blessing deck is destroyed or gone through completely, and if you still have some heroes left over, you've won the scenario. Can you work as a team? Go through a solid adventure, find the bad guy, and defeat him before your party is defeated. That is the Pathfinder Adventure Card Game. The Pathfinder Adventure Card Game retails for $60, and for that $60 you gain nearly 500 cards and a fantastic insert that comes with the game. It organizes all the cards by different kind of card types that you have for the game, from your enemies to your cards that go in your player's deck, and there's even room for all the additional adventure paths you'll be buying to complete the complete adventure path that comes with the game, which is an additional 6 decks plus the additional character deck, which is going to add 4 additional characters, 110 extra cards, and the ability to play the game with up to 6 players. In addition, there's a nice section over here in the corner which allows you to keep everybody's player deck off to the side after an adventure is complete, so you can continue the adventure path and not have to worry about shuffling each one of your character decks back into the base game. They're each ready, so once you're set up and you're going through the adventure path, each character deck is set up at definitely a very, very nice touch. Now, like I said, the game comes with nearly 500 cards, and they're pretty decent card stock. They got a good snap to them, and all the cards have artwork on them. Now, I like the artwork. I have heard some complaints about the artwork that is recycled from the Pathfinder RPG. I have never played the Pathfinder RPG, so I don't know if that's the case, but I can say I do like the artwork that's come with the game. All the artwork that comes with the game is full color. They take up about half the card, and they look fantastic. And they even went through the extra trouble of making some extra additional things to the cards to help separate the cards to simplify learning the game. For example, all the standard encounters you have are orange. The henchmen are red. Spells have a purple border around the sides of them. Weapon cards have a gray border on them. Kind of a nice little touch to help you separate the cards, and it's going to be really good to help you actually learn the game when you first start out learning to play the game. Now, while most of the cards are easy to read, they have a nice, easy to read font. It's no strange fonts that's going to bother your eyes when you're trying to read them, or very minuscule text or anything like that. Not all the cards are error-free, and if you look at the back of my rule book, I've actually taken the time to write all the different cards that have a rat on them so I remember them. That helped me learn the game. And while we're on the topic of the rule book, want to go ahead and let you know that this rule book probably could have used a little bit better editing. It's not like there's a lot of excessive problems with the rule book. There's just so many places where they could have gone into greater detail to explain how to play the game. For somebody who has got a lot of history playing RPGs, a lot of the rules will make sense, like skill checks. If you played an RPG before, you know what a skill check is. You know how to read a D10, you know that the 0 is actually a 10, not a 0. A lot of these things aren't explained to board gamers. Now the problem with the Pathfinder game, it's a board game card game created by a company that's been making RPGs for years. And you can see where some of the assumptions were made when they designed the game. They didn't quite think about designing the game for board gamers. They designed the game for role players. So some of the rules could have used a little bit more clarification. Additionally, there are some actual errors that come with the game. Before you play for the first time, especially if you're going to make the character decks they tell you to make, and I definitely suggest you do that, because these are designed to help you go through the adventures. The first couple times you play the game, you're not going to understand what cards are the best to put in your character's decks. So you're definitely going to want to pick out and create the cards decks the way they tell you to. But I would definitely go through and download the correct version that tells you what their deck should actually contain. And some of these are very, very important distinguishing differences. For example, like the Paladin, if you follow just the way the rules tell you in the rule book here, you're actually going to start with some of the advanced armor that you shouldn't even have access to till you've gone through an adventure, which is definitely going to give you an extremely unfair advantage. Basically what I'm saying is, before you play the Pathfinder game for the first time, download the frequently asked questions, make sure you go over and find all the rules errors there in the rule book, write in your rule book if you have to, or download whatever you need to do. Just make sure you do that before the first time you play the game. Overall, for $60, you're not getting too bad of a value for this game. I think they probably could have had the price come down just a little bit, especially considering there's less than 500 cards. I've seen lots of card games that have that many cards that you can get for a little bit less. Although, to be perfectly fair, the game does come with a fantastic insert. It does come with dice, but for $60, I think they should have included a couple extra things. The most important thing I think they should have included in this game were some character record sheets. Now, when you play this game, what they expect you to do is you're going to be playing these heroes, and they're going to be leveling up as the game goes, which means they're going to be gaining skills. And what Paizo expected you to do is to have your character sheet. Hopefully I'll grab the right one here so it matches up. Actually, just be quick, I'll just grab one in random. And what they're going to expect you to do is, as you start getting skills and abilities, is you're going to start ticking off these skills, and which is going to permanently mark these cards. Of course, there's a couple ways to get around that. You could sleeve your cards, which is an additional expense, and then write on the sleeves themselves, which you have run the risk of them wiping off or smudging off when you store the game. Or you can go directly to Paizo's website and download these character sheets, which is basically a larger version of these characters with all the information on a character sheet that you can mark up. My contention is that for the $60 we're spending for this game, these should have been in the box immediately. Call me a stickler for small details, but when I purchase a game and bring it home, I expect to be able to play the game out of the box, not be expected to go out there and buy additional things or access the internet to play a game or download additional things to play a game. I expect a game to be playable out of a box. In my opinion, they definitely should have added character sheets to the game, or at least given extras of these cards if they expected us to write on these cards to level up and advance our characters. Other than that, and the issue I had with the rulebook, you're probably not going to have too many complaints with what you're getting in the box. Yeah, $60 may be a little bit on the high side. I think they probably could have got away with $50, but I do understand that the extra injected mold for the storage, plus the additional dice that come with the game, may have actually added to the retail value of the game. Overall, not a bad package, but this is definitely a game that needed a few more quality control issues, and they definitely should have thought a little bit better about how they expected you to advance your characters. Every time I do a review for a board game, I like to take a few minutes to discuss the family friendliness of the game. I have a family, I have 2 kids. I enjoy playing games with my kids, and it's really nice sometimes just discuss how family friendly games are. I know games list a minimum age, but it's not always accurate. Sometimes this minimum age requirement seems more arbitrary versus a good decision. And I understand why it's done, but I like to actually take a minute and discuss how sometimes a game can actually be more family friendly, or cannot be, as the case may be, or why I feel that way. Now, the Pathfinder Adventure game says that's a game for ages 13 and up, and most of that I think is because there is a lot of reading required for this game. Plus, there actually is a lot going on in this game, and there are a little more gruesome images. Now, not all of them are this bad, but a good example would be the zombie, which shows a lot of graphic artwork. It's good artwork, it's really high fantasy artwork, but it's probably not artwork you're going to want super young kids looking at, ages 7 or 8 or younger. Probably this isn't the kind of artwork you're going to want them to look at. Although the complexity level of the game, if you're actually just being taught the game and not having to learn on your own, especially if you have somebody who knows how to play, who can really walk you through it, the game isn't so complex that somebody who's 10 years or 11 could have trouble figuring out how to play the game. The game really is not that hard to figure out. It's basically a lot of randomness. You have the randomness of the dice, you have the randomness of playing cards, and it is a really good cooperative game. The players are going to survive as a party, or they're going to fail as a party, and it really forces players to think and act and work together. As a matter of fact, the rules actually make a suggestion that while you're playing the game in the early stages, feel free to play with an open hand so all the players can see what your hand is, helping you all work together for the communal goal of defeating the adventure. Additionally, the game does have campaign play, which is going to allow you to get a lot of play out of this game, especially if it's a game your family enjoys. You are going to get a lot of hours out of this game, especially if you buy the expansion packs, the additional 5 expansion packs, which will take you through the entire story of the Rise of the Rune Lords. You're probably looking at, I'd say, probably easy 40 to 50 hours of gameplay out of this game if you go through the entire campaign, through all the adventures and everything, just to complete the entire campaign. Not only that, the game does play with up to 6 players. Now, I'm going to get into this in a moment. I don't recommend you play this game for 6 players because the blessing deck is going to be a real curse in this game, literally, because you're just not going to have enough time to get everything done. But if you do have a family of 4 or 5, this game can handle that. And not only that, as I said, it's really fun to play this game with your family and play through the entire campaign with your family, going through from the beginning to the end, and it makes it a really good family game of that aspect. The trick is, though, I definitely would not recommend this game for players under the age of 11. While a 9-year-old could easily figure out how to play this game, and I know an 8-year-old could probably easily figure out how to play this game, the game can be really challenging with the decisions you're going to have to make, especially with decisions that come later in the campaign where you're actually being forced to discard cards permanently, which are going to affect how your character is built. And also the character building itself can get a little bit complex. Plus, there are some images in the game that may not be too family friendly. Now, the base box for the Pathfinder Adventure Card Game does list for 1 to 4 players, and if you buy the character expansion pack, you can actually take this up to a 6-player game. And even if you don't plan on playing this with 6 players, and you do enjoy the base game, I definitely recommend you pick up the Adventure Character Pack. Just get the extra classes that are available. The extra classes in there are some of the ones I actually prefer over the base classes. I like the Paladin better than the Warrior, for example. And when I play, I actually use the Paladin and not the Warrior. But I don't want to get too much off topic. What I'm trying to say is this game, I will not play it with 6 players. Now, there's a couple reasons why I want to use a higher player count. First of all, the blessing deck that comes with this game, every time you play it, you're going to have exactly 30 cards in the blessing deck, which means you have 30 turns to go through the game. But with the more players you have, the more locations you have, the more cards you're going to have to go through. In a 6-player game, you have 30 rounds to go through potentially up to 80 cards, and that's just assuming that you don't have any failures while fighting a villain, which is going to add more cards to the locations and start subtracting cards from your blessing deck. The game can be nearly impossible with 6 players if you just have some random bad luck, because you're not going to be able to beat that blessing deck. It's going to wear out and run out before you can find the villain. Statistically, on average, you have 30 rounds to go through 80 cards. Assuming you get about halfway through, you're looking at probably 30 rounds to get through 40 cards. But I don't want to bore you with the randomness of what can and cannot go wrong. On the other end of the spectrum, this game with only 1 hero, I'm not too much of a fan of this game with only playing with 1 hero either, because there's really not much of a challenge from this blessing deck at all, because in a 1-player game, you only have 3 locations with a maximum of 30 cards to go through potentially, and you have 30 rounds to do it, so the blessing deck is almost nearly not even a challenge, which makes the game almost too easy with 1 player. To shorten this up, I think that the Pathfinder card game is best with a 3 or 4 players. I definitely would not play it with more than 4, and I really want to play it with 1 at all, and I probably am not a fan of the game with only 2 players either, or I should say 2 heroes. Basic minimum, I'd say play this game with about 3 heroes or 4 heroes. That way you're going to get the extreme challenge from the timing of the blessing deck. Plus, it's going to force you to actually start burning your cards that you could just hold back without any extra worry about having to use them up. For example, cards like the Night Watch, when you're playing with more players, you're going to be forced to start burning those cards to get the extra exploration actions. You're going to be forced to start burning your blessings to get those extra exploration actions because you're not going to have enough rounds to go through all those cards. So you definitely will get more of a challenge when you have 3 or 4 players. But again, at the far end with 6 players, the game just becomes near impossible, and with 1 player, it's pretty much a boring slog. At the risk of being blunt, I would rather read one of those choose your own adventure digital books that you can get on a tablet than play this game with 1 player. The game is just too random, and it's either going to be way too easy or it's going to be nearly impossible depending on how the dice rolls are, and you really don't have to make any really difficult decisions. With 1 player, the decisions are almost to the point where they're pretty much brainless. You're going to look at the averages, say, yes, I can win this, no, I can't win this, and I'm not really feeling pressure by the blessing deck. Overall, good game for 3 to 4 players, not good with 1 player, not good with 6 players. The first few times I played the Pathfinder Adventure Card Game, I did not like this game at all. Matter of fact, the first couple times I played the game solo, just choosing 1 hero, because whenever I learn to play a game, what's the first thing you do? You pull it out and you play a solo game to see if you can figure out how to play the game. And since the game is fully co-op, does have solo rules, I decided to run through the game as a solo player by myself, and I thought this was the most boring, worst game I played in a long time. And I think the thing that really bothered me the most is it reminded me of those tablet choose your own adventure games that you get on the tablets. They're basically digital books, fighting fantasy games, where you basically play the game by reading a little bit of text, hitting a button, it rolls some random dice, and you don't know if you're going to succeed or not because everything is completely random. You hit a button, something's going to happen, some random dice are going to roll, you're going to take damage, or maybe you won't take damage. You can keep repeating this over and over and over, where your decisions really don't feel like they matter much. You feel like you're basically a slave to the randomness of the dice. And this is how I felt the first couple times I played the Pathfinder Adventure Card Game solo with 1 hero. And in all honesty, it's part of the randomness of the game that causes this, because with 1 hero, and I've already harped on this enough so I don't want to reiterate the point too much, with 1 hero, your decisions in this game are extremely minimized. It's basically move, flip a card, roll a die, move, flip a card, roll a die. There are no decisions except for you're just going to take the averages every time you make an encounter, and you're going to do a quick mental calculation. You're going to look and see that an encounter is going to cause you to roll an 8 or higher to succeed. You're going to look and say, okay, I have to roll an 8-sider to see if I succeed. I have a 1 in 8 chance of succeeding here. Yes, I'll play a card to raise my odds, because if I fail, I'm going to have to discard cards anyways. It's pretty brainless. My decisions are already chosen for me. I'm just basically going from location to location, hoping I'm running into henchmen, hoping to close locations, hoping that I can find the villain and end the slog. And then I played the Pathfinder game with some friends, and I got a couple of us together. We had a 4-group adventure, and we went through it, and guess what? We lost. We got our butts handed to us by the simple fact that we ran out of time. We were not using cards effectively or efficiently, and we weren't forcing more explorations, because the first couple times I played it, I felt no challenge from the blessing deck, so I didn't think we had to keep digging deep, because I figured, man, the game was easy. I'm just giving it another try to give it a fair review. But we got destroyed. After that, I sat down and looked over the game again after I had some time by myself, and I said, you know what, maybe I've been looking at this game entirely wrong this entire time. While I may still think, and even to this day I still think, this game is not fun with 1 hero, there are some decisions to this game. They're just not as obvious in the beginning when you first start playing it. And the decisions are going to start from the basics when you're forming your party. Some parties are going to work better together, some are going to have better synergy, some heroes can assist each other better, and some are just really good at going there, knocking on the door, kicking over the door, knocking down the monsters. Some are good for exploring. The dwarf who I didn't show you, he's really good at exploring the locations. He can explore them without actually encountering them. Then there's the rogue. She can actually go to locations. If she gets bad cards, she can evade them. And once you start playing with all these party members together and forming parties and going into a dungeon, the game starts living up more to its RPG roots, because in an RPG, what does everybody do? Everybody forms a party, everybody has their strengths, everybody has their weaknesses in a party, and they work together to solve the adventure. And then I learned there's even more strategy of the game just by looking at the various locations. Now, each one of the locations has a certain amount of animals or creatures or monsters that are going to be in those locations. Some locations don't have a lot of monsters to fight, so those are really good locations to send your heroes who don't have really good fighting statistics to go explore those and start looking for equipment, start looking for spells, start looking for treasures to help out the rest of the party. And then there's some locations that have a lot of monsters and a lot of barriers and a lot of tough encounters. Those are the ones you start sending your fighting characters to, and that judges where you want to go. Not only that, some locations are better to be closed before other locations. And that's where the strategy started coming up, when I started realizing there is actually more to this game than what it appears in the beginning. And then as I played the game more and started going through the adventure path and started actually leveling up the heroes and giving them their extra special abilities, I started learning that some of the heroes just aren't great in the beginning, especially solo. I mean, some of them are pretty much outclassed in the beginning if you're playing them solo, but it's not impossible, but it can be really challenging for them. So as you level up your heroes and you start modifying your decks, it almost gives the game almost kind of a legacy feel, like Risk Legacy, but you're not destroying cards permanently. You're just modifying your heroes, to the point where I started realizing that as I played the game more and more with different people, they'd play the same hero, but they'd start building their decks differently and giving them different abilities. They start leveling up, getting different abilities for the heroes. When they leveled up, they choose different heroes than the other players were choosing, and their heroes started playing just ever so slightly differently, depending on what they thought their deficiencies were to help out the party. At this point, I kind of give this game more of a feel that it's less of an RPG, and I more describe it more as a massively multiplayer online computer RPG, and this is what the game really reminds me of after I played it a whole bunch of times. You can go back and revisit adventures in the hopes of getting better gear, just like an MMO. You can repeatedly do dungeons in an MMO to continually improve your character. The monsters will level up with you. Some of the monsters actually say on the card, the strength of this encounter is the strength plus the level of the adventure you're currently on. So since the adventures are level 1 through 6, the very first adventure is level 1, which means all creatures that have that annotation on them are going to be their difficulty +1, whereas if you're in adventure number 6, they're going to be +6. So 8 strength creature is going to be a 14 strength creature once you're at the 16th or the 6th adventure. And again, that also reminded me of an MMO where in the beginning you fight bats, and in the end you're still fighting bats that are just stronger bats. Now, I still contend the game does have problems, but I am starting to like it more, and the game is starting to grow on me, and I am enjoying it a lot more. The game still definitely does have its warts, though, and this is definitely going to be one of those games that's going to be pretty polarizing. You're either really going to love this game and enjoy it for the fact that you're taking a character, you're leveling them up, you're getting them more powerful, and you're going through an entire storyline. You're going to love that. Or you're going to look at the game, you're going to see the warts, you're going to see the deficiencies, you're going to see that there's a lot of randomness to this game that you really cannot counteract. There's no way around it. And sometimes the luck is going to be against you and there's no way you're going to be able to win. And you're going to concentrate on that stuff and you're not going to enjoy the game. There have been times where I've rolled the dice and thought I had a sure thing and I've completely lost. And there's been times where I've just barely made it by the skin of my teeth. In the sample game, if you watch my instructional video that has the sample gameplay, you're going to see there's a few times where I just barely make it by the skin of my teeth, some of those dice rolls. And that can be some pretty tense moments in the game. Now, as I said, the game does have a couple warts in it. There are some cards that have some major errata on them. I believe there's 7 cards that actually have straight up errors on them that you're either going to have to write on or do what I did, write on the back of your rule books to remember what those cards are, and you don't forget them until you get more familiar with the game. The rulebook itself definitely could use some TLC. There's a lot of places where they could use more clarification, especially for people who are not familiar with role-playing games. And as a matter of fact, there's also some card deficiencies. If you manage to get the card Skeleton Horde and you're playing a larger player game, a 4-player game, there's actually not enough Ancient Skeleton cards in the game. First time we played it, we actually had that happen with us with 4 players, and nobody knew what the statistics were for the Ancient Skeletons. So we actually had to dig through and figure out what the statistics were, which we thought was really a bad thing. In addition, the game should have come with character record sheets, especially if we're supposed to be leveling up these characters. You shouldn't be forced to go to the internet and download these, or you shouldn't be forced to write on your character cards. This should have been in the box. It's a piece of paper. It's not that hard. It's not going to add a lot to the cost of the game. You could include a pack of 5 character sheets for each extra character with minimal extra cost for the game. Seriously, that was a major oversight. Also, when you're first learning the game, it can get a little bit confusing, especially when you start getting all these different effects that are going on that you have to constantly monitor. A lot of the locations have special effects that you have to keep monitoring all the time and make sure you're paying attention to those and not missing those special effects. Plus, all the heroes have their own special effects, so you got to make sure you're constantly watching them so you don't forget what their special abilities are, because they're going to help you throughout the scenarios. And on top of that, some of the scenarios themselves also have special abilities. You got to make sure you're not missing those either, especially the one with the Black Fang's Lair, where you got to remember that you're going to start running into extra creatures, so you can't forget about that. So again, the first couple times you play in this game, you're going to forget things. Don't beat yourself up over it. It's going to happen. There's just a lot going on in this game. I mean, I played this game probably about at least 20 times now, and I even forget occasionally just to advance the blessing deck. It just happens. There's a lot going on in this game. And finally, the biggest complaint I can levy at this game is that the game can just be so darn random and luck dependent. It's like playing an old style D&D game with a DM who's drunk and had a couple of beers, where you kick down a door, you fight a goblin, you kick down the next door, and there's a level 15 dragon ready to eat you and bite you in half. That's just how random this game is. Additionally, there's a few other instances which were kind of wacky. For instance, you'd walk into a temple and you'd fall into a pit. I guess that could make sense. But why am I having a collapsed ceiling when I'm in the waterfront? It seems odd. But honestly, that's a very, very minor thing. It's just sometimes some things would be encountered that just didn't make sense for the situation. Again, that's just the randomness of the game. This is just one of those games, to sum up, that if the randomness is in your favor, you're going to have a lot of fun with this game. But if the randomness is not in your favor, it's just going to basically be a slog and you're just going to be running down, just waiting for the game to end. On the average, the game is more fun than it's not fun, but definitely keep in mind, keep a good player count. Look at playing this game as a long campaign. It's not meant to be played as one-offs. And if you're definitely looking for a game with the right theme, this may be the game you'd be interested in. This is definitely a game that for me personally had to grow on me, because I didn't like it in the beginning, but the more I played it, the more I've enjoyed it. I don't think this is a perfect game. As a matter of fact, I'm hoping the Shadowrun card game made by Catalyst is going to be better, because I like the idea of playing an RPG in a card game, but I think this game just barely misses the mark for me personally. I can see some people enjoying it if they look past the warts, but for me it was a little bit too random. But I will still enjoy playing it because I like the campaign progression, and I'm looking forward to other games built along this line. Hopefully with the next adventure path brought out by the Pathfinder, this game series does continue and works out some of the warts in the game. I'd like to see the gameplay continue. I'm looking forward to it. This has been another Off the Shelf board game review. Thanks for watching.